Have you ever stopped and asked yourself a simple but unsettling question? What if the world you see every day isn't the full story? What if reality itself is far stranger, deeper, and more connected than we've ever been taught? What if your thoughts, your awareness, even your sense of self are not isolated at all, but part of something vast, shared, and timeless? Today, we explore the life and ideas of Erwin Schrödinger, a man whose work reshaped modern science, and whose philosophical reflections still challenge how we understand life, consciousness, and reality itself. This is not just the story of equations and experiments. This is the story of a scientist who dared to look beyond numbers and ask what they truly mean. Welcome to Soul to Wisdom. Erwin Schrödinger was born in Vienna in 1887, a city alive with art, music, and intellectual energy. From an early age, he showed a deep fascination with science and mathematics. But unlike many of his peers, Schrödinger was never satisfied with memorizing formulas or solving problems by routine. He wanted to understand what reality really is. As a young man, he immersed himself in physics, eventually becoming one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. His name would become forever linked with one of the most important breakthroughs in modern science, the wave equation. This mathematical formulation, now known worldwide as the Schrödinger equation, changed everything. For the first time, scientists had a way to describe and predict the behavior of particles at the smallest scales of existence. Atoms were no longer tiny solid objects behaving like miniature planets. Instead, they followed strange rules, governed by probabilities, waves, and uncertainty. The equation revealed a universe far more mysterious than classical physics had ever imagined. In recognition of this groundbreaking contribution, Schrödinger was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1933. The award confirmed his place among the giants of science. Yet for Schrödinger, the prize was not an endpoint, it was only a milestone. Because while the world celebrated his equations, Schrödinger's mind was already wandering into deeper territory. Schrödinger was not content with understanding how nature works. He wanted to know why. He wanted to know what all of this meant for life, for consciousness, and for human existence itself. At a time when most scientists avoided philosophical questions, Schrödinger leaned into them. He believed that science, stripped of deeper reflection, was incomplete. He began exploring biology, philosophy, and even Eastern spiritual traditions. These were not casual interests. They were serious attempts to understand reality as a whole, not as isolated parts. In his famous book, What is Life?, Schrödinger examined living systems through the lens of physics. He discussed how biological order arises from molecular processes, laying early foundations for molecular biology. But woven into the science were philosophical questions that went far beyond cells and genes. What does it mean to be alive? What distinguishes living matter from non-living matter? And where does consciousness fit into all of this? These questions haunted Schrödinger, especially as he grew older. One subject, in particular, captured his attention more than any other: consciousness. At the time, the dominant scientific view treated consciousness as a byproduct of brain activity, a kind of accidental side effect of neurons firing. According to this view, once the brain stops, consciousness simply disappears. Schrödinger found this explanation deeply unsatisfying. He argued that consciousness could not be fully explained by physical processes alone. No matter how detailed our understanding of the brain becomes, it does not explain subjective experience, the feeling of being aware, the inner world of thoughts, sensations, and identity. Why does matter arranged in a certain way suddenly produce experience? Why is there something it feels like to be you? Schrödinger proposed a radical alternative. Consciousness is not created by the material world. Instead, consciousness is fundamental. In other words, consciousness is not something that emerges from matter. Matter emerges within consciousness. This idea shocked many of his contemporaries and continues to spark debate today. Schrödinger's views on consciousness were deeply shaped by his work in quantum mechanics. The quantum world had already shattered classical assumptions about reality. At the quantum level, particles do not behave like solid objects. They exist in superpositions, multiple states at once, until observed. They can be entangled, meaning that two particles remain connected regardless of the distance between them. A change in one instantly affects the other. These phenomena defy common sense. They challenge our everyday understanding of space, time, and separation. Schrödinger realized that if the physical universe behaves in such strange, interconnected ways, then perhaps our understanding of mind and self is also incomplete. If reality at its foundation is not made of independent, isolated objects, but of relationships, probabilities, and connections, then why should consciousness be different? This line of thinking led him to a profound conclusion. The universe is deeply unified. From this realization emerged Schrödinger's embrace of monism, the idea that reality is ultimately one. Monism holds that beneath the apparent diversity of the world lies a single underlying substance or principle. Everything we experience is a manifestation of this one reality. This idea was not new. It appears in ancient philosophical and spiritual traditions, especially in Eastern thought. Schrödinger studied texts from India and was particularly influenced by Vedantic philosophy, which teaches that the individual self is not separate from the universal whole. What made Schrödinger's approach unique was that he arrived at similar conclusions through modern science. Quantum mechanics suggested that separation is not fundamental. The boundaries we perceive between objects, people, even minds, may be convenient illusions created by limited perception. In this view, there is only one universal consciousness. Individual minds are not separate entities, but expressions of that same underlying awareness. To explain this idea, Schrödinger used a simple yet powerful metaphor. Imagine the ocean. Each wave appears separate. Each has its own shape, movement, and lifespan. But no wave exists independently of the ocean. Every wave is made of the same water. When a wave rises and falls, the ocean remains. According to Schrödinger, consciousness works the same way. Your individual awareness is like a wave. It has a beginning and an end. It changes from moment to moment, but it arises from and returns to the same universal consciousness shared by all. This challenges our deeply ingrained sense of individuality. We are taught to see ourselves as separate beings navigating a world of other separate beings. Schrödinger suggested that this sense of separation is an illusion. At the deepest level, there is only one consciousness looking out through many perspectives. This realization carries profound implications. If we are not isolated minds, but interconnected expressions of a unified whole, then our actions matter far beyond our immediate surroundings. Every thought, every intention, every choice sends ripples through the fabric of reality. We are not independent actors on a disconnected stage. We are participants in a vast, interconnected process. This perspective naturally leads to compassion. When harm is done to another, it is not happening to someone else. It is happening within the same shared reality we all belong to. Responsibility becomes deeper. Meaning becomes broader. Life is no longer a random accident in an indifferent universe. It is a dynamic expression of a unified, living whole. Schrödinger understood that these ideas were not easy to accept. They challenge the very foundation of how we see ourselves and the world. But he believed that science, when pursued honestly, leads us toward humility. The more we uncover about reality, the more we realize how little we truly know. In his later years, Schrödinger continued to write and reflect, bridging science and philosophy in ways few dared to attempt. He did not claim to have final answers. Instead, he offered a different way of seeing, a broader lens through which science and human experience could coexist. Today, as neuroscience, physics, and philosophy continue to explore consciousness, many of Schrödinger's questions remain open. Yet his insights feel more relevant than ever. In a world increasingly divided, his vision reminds us of our shared foundation, that beneath the surface of difference, beneath names, roles, and identities, there is something profoundly unified. So the next time you feel separate, disconnected, alone, remember this idea. You are not an isolated wave struggling against the ocean. You are the ocean experiencing itself as a wave. And in that understanding lies a quieter, deeper wisdom. The kind that doesn't just inform the mind, but speaks directly to the soul. This is Soul to Wisdom,